Hey. Uh, Welcome to episode 265 of Awkwardly Awesome Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Freeman, and today's episode is called From Greyhound to Gustav. And my guest today will correct me on my saying of the last name Gustav. Most likely, which and I should know how to say this names inside and out because my guest today has been working on a major book project for 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 more than a decade. And I've known my guest today since high school. I'm so honored to have him on, and at the same time, I'm really nervous because I want to do justice to him as a brilliant poet, a brilliant author, a brilliant person. And at the same time, I want to celebrate a friendship. And there are just so many things to do at once. Do you ever have times in your life where there's so many things to do at once? I think we all do. So we'll see how this goes. But before I bring him on, I want to read you how his book starts. This may seem like a simple book of poems. Yes, it contains poetry inspired by sculpture, but neither the poems or the statues are the true focus. The real subject here is your life, dear reader. The real subject here is your life, dear reader. Please help me welcome my guest, but first, this.
Today's guest, Jason Ranek.
Hey, Jason, welcome to Awkwardly Awesome Podcast.
Hey, Jace. Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So when did you first get the inkling that you wanted to become a poet?
I think it started in freshman year of high school. I remember, I think it was around the time that our high school put on the musical, which was a big production every year. And, usually it was very extroverted, outgoing, popular kids who seemed to, who tried out for the musical for one thing and usually got assigned those roles. And, as I think is the experience of most high school freshmen, I wasn't that guy. I lacked self-confidence. I was insecure. I was introverted, but yet I knew I had a lot of creativity, and I suppose it was just a way to, it was a way for me to express that in a way that was private, but still felt meaningful and significant. So I guess
you had a part in the musical?
Eventually, senior year, I got into the musical actually, which I suppose speaks to my arc in high school. But freshman year, um, poetry was kind of my private rebellion against the glam and the glitter of the high school musical.
I get it now. So you knew the people in the musical had a voice, and you wanted a voice too, and poetry was kind of how you found that voice.
I would say so. Yeah. But it was really important to me at the time that it was private, that it was secret almost. Yet, I suppose as all beginning writers, hope that one day their words will find an audience, that they will actually get published, and that other people will interact with those private words. So that was the starting point, really.
Why do you think it was so important to you and probably many beginning poets and writers to keep their words private?
I think because at that time I was writing with the belief that poetry was primarily about self-expression. And as a young person, as a teenager, expressing oneself can feel dangerous. It can feel frightening,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and I suppose too that there's something about the fact that poetry or any writing can be revised. It can be revisited. It can be reworked until it's said in a way that stays said. So I suppose that was part of it.
Something that was so important to you, I don't know how early this started, but definitely in high school, was your spiritual journey. How did you begin to become interested in making that a priority for yourself?
Well, I grew up in a very religious family, for one thing, so I was definitely inculcated in the rites and rituals of the Catholic Church. That was very formative for me in my younger years, and was a big part of my childhood. And I suppose that's sort of where my spiritual journey started. Um, as I aged, my spiritual inquiries began to range beyond the limits of the church, and eventually even beyond the limits of Christianity. But I think for me, it was a way of trying to understand myself, my own suffering, my own sense of dis-ease, of dissatisfaction with life, with the world, which is part and parcel of the human experience.
Hmm. Um. Well, so we met in high school, but by chance, or by synchronicity. How would you define the word synchronicity?
Oh, synchronicity. Well, Carl Jung, who coined the term, the Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung, he defined it as an acausal connecting principle. And I've never really been able to get to the bottom of exactly what that means. That phrase has always left me a little bit mystified. So I've always preferred to call synchronicity meaningful coincidence. You know, it's or another way. I think what makes a coincidence meaningful is when something in your inner world aligns with something in your outer world. You know, there's an alignment there that kind of crosses the personal boundary and feels meaningful, feels inherently meaningful, seems to flaunt the laws of probability. So I guess that's as close as I could come to a definition.
So I was a beginning poet also, and I think I had some inner yearning to share poetry with more than my parents, which was wonderful. But I must have had some inner yearning. And then one day I'm at the Sioux Falls Zoo with another friend, and happened to meet you and one of your friends who also became a great friend. What do you remember about that day?
Well, I just remember kind of being a little bit shocked that I met someone else who liked poetry. You know, poetry unfortunately has kind of long been a dying art, and it seems like that there aren't that many people who are drawn to the form anymore. But of course, you had the benefit of having a father who's a poet, so that actually left me a little bit in awe because I think I felt like you automatically had some chops just by virtue of just by virtue of your father. So no, I think I definitely think that poetry was an important and early spark in our friendship for sure.
Maybe this is backing up in the conversation. Maybe it's going forward, and I don't know. But what do you? Why are you passionate about creating poetry? What about creating poetry do you love so much?
What I love about creating poetry is that it is an embodied experience. And I think if it's done correctly, and by done correctly, I mean composed in the right spirit, it is absolutely a process of discovery for the poet as much as it is for the reader. And that can't be faked. When it's genuine, the reader feels it. And not only that, but a reader can pick up on the signals, the marks of that genuine quality. It's in the music of the language. It's in the rhythm of the words. It's in the images and the metaphors. And when it's read out loud, when the living breath is expelled as living language, it becomes something like no other art form. It really is an art form that one can participate in a way that I think is different from any other.
So many people associate poetry being with being assigned obscure poems in grade school and high school and forced to read them and maybe forced to memorize them and that being just a utterly miserable and boring experience. But you're talking about poetry as an embodied experience that is this immensely wonderful thing. Can you say more about that?
Poets from Yeats to Retke to, more poets than I can name have compared poetry to music and to dancing. And I think that when poetry is read out loud, and I have to emphasize that poetry is a verbal art form. It's meant to be spoken. It's meant to be intoned, incanted, almost sung. And when it is, it really it becomes embodied. You feel it in your body. And in that experience, the meaning almost becomes secondary. Almost. The meaning is still absolutely important. But I think this is why people find studying poetry such a chore, is because, first of all, the teachers don't really know how to read a poem. They don't know how to access that music and to share the appreciation of that music with the students. And I will never forget that, I think when I began sort of a more mature phase of my journey in poetry was when I was a freshman in college, and my English lit professor played a recording of Dylan Thomas reading his poem Fern Hill. And it's available online. Anyone can go find it. And it was an absolutely transcendent experience. It was like a stick of dynamite that blew out all the doors and windows of my mind. And at that moment, I understood poetry as music. And I knew that this is what I wanted to devote my life to.
If any of you listening haven't heard Dylan Thomas read, I encourage you to go online and do that. I mean, his voice is magical.
Absolutely. And he's Welsh, so that helps. You can't beat that accent.
Since you're talking about breath and how important the breath is in poetry and how much it's meant to be enjoyed through the recitation of it. Please talk a little about your journey with meditation, which also obviously involves breath.
Yeah, as I said, as my spiritual journey progressed, I had always been curious about meditation, even as a very young Catholic person. And
why do you think you were curious about meditation?
I don't even really know. I just, there was something about just sitting still and being quiet and paying attention. Something about that, I think from a very early age, struck me as, the purest form of prayer, maybe is the word. I don't know, but I was always curious about it. And I, as a very young teenager, I would make my own faltering attempts to meditate. And as I got older, as I entered college, I began to become more interested and do more exploration. And I think it was towards the end of my college career and perhaps the first year after I graduated that I became serious about trying to establish a daily practice. And yeah, as you pointed out, meditation is deeply connected with the breath. It's also, I think a lot of people have the idea that meditation is something very mental, and it really, my experience is that it's actually very physical. It's an embodied experience. It's the practice of being in your body, with emphasis on that word being. Just being.
And allowing the breath to what?
Well, the breath is a very useful anchor. It rises and falls. It can steady the mind. It can become a little easier to let go of your thinking when you have something rhythmic like the breath to kind of fall back on.
It's a beautiful description. So you got your undergrad degree at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. And that degree was in poetry or in creative writing?
It was a Bachelor of Fine Arts in creative writing.
Yeah, I should. But so, while you were getting that degree and living in Omaha, I happened to be going with some of my college friends on a spring break trip, and we thought it would be an adventure to take a Greyhound bus from Sioux Falls to Chicago. And the most direct way from Sioux Falls to Chicago is not at all through Omaha, but the Greyhound bus went through Omaha and stopped in Omaha at the bus station, and we had a break, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my dear friend Jason lives here, so I call you on the phone. What happens then?
Well, you gave me a call, and I remember it was in the evening, and you said, hey, I've got an hour at the bus station. You want to come hang out? I said, sure. And as we were both writers, we had something of a habit of whipping out our latest pieces of writing, practically as soon as we saw each other. I think you did manage an introduction of your traveling companions, which were 2 Norwegian exchange students. One of whom I am now married to. However, it couldn't really be considered love at first sight. She didn't exactly swoon and fall into my arms, because you and I were already unfolding the latest poems we had written that we had, crammed into our jeans pockets. And I think we were reading them out loud to each other right there in the middle of the Greyhound bus station, as we were both advocates of the philosophy that poetry needs to be read out loud. So it was
amateur English poems probably are not the most exciting thing to a native Norwegian
speaker. To a Norwegian exchange student, absolutely not. No. the whole thing was probably awkwardly awesome.
Extremely awkwardly awesome. But you happen to mention that this woman who you first met at this bus station became your wife. How did this story tie in? I'm sorry, this is a huge question, but how does this story tie in with this beautiful book you wrote?
Okay. Well, after meeting in the Greyhound bus station, Teresa and I eventually kind of got our act together and managed to go out on some dates, and things progressed from there. And we were married in May of 2000. You were one of my groomsmen, for which I am very grateful. And from there on, we moved around a bit. We lived in the U.S. for 4 years after we got married, and I think we moved almost every year.
Including a small town in Missouri, right?
Yeah, we lived in Trimble, Missouri for a year, which was a very interesting experience. But we eventually decided to move to Norway, and that was partially serious, partially on a whim. Teresa is an only child, and her parents were older, and she did feel a certain amount of obligation of living near them and being in their vicinity so that she could be of help. And for my part, I think I just kind of wanted the adventure of living abroad. Yeah, never mind the fact that I didn't really have a marketable degree or, a great deal of a real marketable skill set. We'll figure it out. And we did, not without some bumps in the road, but to tie it into the book, before Teresa and I married, she took me to Norway to meet her parents and to show me the place that she was from. And one of the places she took me was the Vigeland Park in Oslo. And most people outside of Scandinavia have never heard of Gustav Vigeland. He was a Norwegian sculptor who lived from 1869 to 1943 and created the largest sculpture installation by a single artist anywhere in the world. The Vigeland Park is comprised of over 200, I think 210 of his sculptures and reliefs. And almost all of them depict people, depict human beings. The statues are all nude. So there's no sort of cultural marker or historical frame given to the art. They're meant to be timeless and universal, and they really depict every sort of human emotional experience and social interaction that you can imagine. It's a panorama of the human experience. Sometimes expressed in kind of surreal and abstract language. He's very innovative with his use of geometric forms, and you might have human figures kind of intertwining into a ring. The centerpiece of the park, which is called the monolith, is a giant pillar or obelisk composed just of these bodies, of these human forms, that at the base they almost seem to be lifeless and dead. And as your eye travels up the obelisk, it's like they almost reanimate, and by the top, they're all kind of reaching for the sky. An extraordinary piece. But I became obsessed with this park from the first time I saw it, and I knew that I wanted to write about it, but I didn't know how. And I think it was about a year after we had moved to Norway that my wife Teresa said to me, "Why don't you write a poem for every statue in the park?" And I'm like, "Brilliant! Of course, that's what I should do." So that was in 2005, and the book went through a couple different iterations in the following 2 decades, but that's where it started.
I said a decade in the intro. It's been 2 decades.
Well, this iteration of the book has probably been about a decade, to be fair. The concept went through some changes.
Do you remember the first poem you wrote? Or the feeling of writing that first poem about the park?
Yeah, I do. And initially, my original idea was that I was just going to try to give a voice to the statues. And that was satisfying, and that was fun. And I think some good poems were written in that version of the book, which I never finished. But eventually, things converged in my life that allowed me to see new possibilities, and kind of took me beyond that original idea of giving a voice to the statues.
How did you get the idea of combining of making these simple poems the voice of the human unconscious, of tying poetry to the exploration of the unconscious?
Well, one of the things that happened was that I became interested in the work of Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst that I mentioned earlier, who coined the term synchronicity. And Carl Jung, many of his concepts have kind of slowly filtered into the popular culture. And I think today most people are familiar with the concept of archetypes, for example, or like the hero's journey, which is kind of an archetypal pattern that you see in many stories. Many Hollywood movies have been based on the pattern of the hero's journey. Certainly synchronicity was a concept of Jung's that has gained some traction in the popular culture, I think. And certainly Jung's concept of the unconscious as a repository of not only our repressed traits and traumas, but also as kind of the storehouse of our creativity and our connection to the spiritual realm. I think these are things that Jung contributed both to psychology and to culture. And reading Jung helped me see new possibilities for interacting with these statues. I began to realize that I could treat the statues as archetypes, and that from there I could find a way that people could interact with the art in a whole new way. And that was based on the principle of synchronicity and divination.
Well, when you say divination, what do you mean?
So divination is a practice that has been known in every culture throughout human history. And it's essentially the practice of reading oracles or telling fortunes. You know, there are many different methods, but in China, they had the I Ching, which was a very ancient book of divination, which is still revered in China today. In the West, we tend to think of things like using tarot cards or reading tea leaves or having your palm read. These are all forms of divination, and divination is simply addressing the unknown through formulating a question and then introducing a randomized operation or event that has like pre-assigned meaningful outcomes, and then using that outcome to answer the question, to create, using that outcome to create a narrative that answers the question. You know, you have different spiritual traditions and occult practices that see this really as something spiritual, and they believe that something paranormal is happening in this process. I tend to take Jung's view, which is that what we are really doing in divination is interacting with the unconscious. So I would tend to see it more as a psychological exercise rather than something paranormal or spiritual.
What would you say to someone who's thinking, but I have so much going on in my conscious life right now, like there's so many things. Why in the world would I want to also interact with my unconscious?
I would say because the unconscious is a living and dynamic space, and you can tap into many inner resources that you don't even know you have. You can learn things about yourself in the unconscious. By interacting with the unconscious, you gain self-knowledge, for one thing, which I think is an inherent good and a vital part of any spiritual path. And you can also access energies that can reshape your life if you interact with them sincerely and with humility, and you're willing to learn and you're willing to listen, because the unconscious does want to communicate with us. It communicates to us in dreams every night, but it doesn't speak in the language of reason and logic. It speaks in the language of symbols and images, and it takes a certain amount of patience and persistence to interact with the unconscious fruitfully. But I think with a bit of practice, certainly in my life, it's proved to be a very fruitful endeavor.
Well, Jason, I actually have a question for the book,
Oh, wow. Okay.
for the article.
All right.
My question is, how can I use my disability as a gift? How can I use my disability as a gift?
Okay. Do you have a die?
Oh, that would have been good for this episode. That would have been really good for this episode.
That's all
Um,
right. I've got a die. I've got a die.
so sometimes
And
I don't. I should be interacting with more with my common sense sometimes.
well, what's strange about this, and I've been playing around with this system now for a good number of years, and it doesn't seem to matter whether the person asking the question rolls or if someone else does. It's weird. It really doesn't seem to matter. I started this incarnation of the project in the hopes of maybe understanding something about synchronicity by the end, and I've utterly failed in that. It's still very mysterious, and I don't understand it. But it's truly wonderful when it manifests. So, okay, your question is, how can my disability be a gift? I'm sorry. Please repeat the question.
How can I use my disability as a gift? How can I use my disability as a gift?
How can I use my disability as a gift? Okay, so you'll just have to trust me here, as the rolls will happen off camera. Okay, first number is 5. Second is 2. And third number is 2. Now, without getting too far into the weeds for the audience, there is a random number table by which the dice rolls are deciphered. And according to the table, your poem is number 93.
Will you please read it?
So, as the visual element is important for understanding the context of the poem, should I describe the relief to the audience, Jace, or should I try to hold it up to the camera?
Please describe it.
Okay. So
I can give you a full screen if you want to hold it up. Okay, then also please describe it.
So the title of the relief, and this is one of the reliefs that you find along the walls of the fountain, which is one of the 3 sections of the park. And Vigeland, he sculpted reliefs in bronze that are installed in the walls, and this is one of those. And it depicts a woman holding a baby with 3 giant and menacing looking fish swimming towards them. So the poem reads, number 93, The Great Work. And the great work is a phrase from alchemy, and it refers to the creation of the philosopher's stone. which is that which allows one to alchemize base metals into gold. So number 93, the great work. Mother and baby on the seabed, the child's inheritance, anger, shame, and fear. Treasure is obtained. Take heart, for the great work is now at hand.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I can relate that. I mean, there's throughout human history there has been so much anger, shame, and fear, and it just as humans, as a human, that's just in my genes. It's in the humans that have lived so I could live. And then there is great work of transforming that sense of quote unquote disability, which for me includes a literal disability, into something else, and that works very much at hand for me. I mean,
yeah, and I guess that's, if I may say, that's what jumped out for me in the poem was, take heart, for the great work is now at hand. And what is at hand? Well, it's your podcast. It's your speaking career. It's your brand. It's Awkwardly Awesome. It's your message to your audiences. That is what is now at hand for you. And that is the use of your disability, if one can call it that, as a gift. So that's sort of what jumped out for me right away.
so what do you counsel your readers to do with the reading?
I counsel people to wrestle with it, because I've noticed two patterns with the book. And one is that there are those moments when the synchronicities really hit big with the book, and it feels like every line, every word, every image is meaningful and directly relevant to the query and the querent. And then there are the readings where you have to kind of wrestle with the words and images, and maybe even let it sit for a while. I've sometimes gone hours or days before I've really understood what my unconscious is saying to me. Sometimes it can be baffling and even a little mystifying, like a dream, and you have to really be persistent to really kind of dig down to what the meaning is at bottom. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. It just, it really is the life of the unconscious, kind of living itself out in these poems. And we receive a poem and we project something onto it. And then it's up to us to discover meaning there.
Speaking of persistence, so I'm holding this book, has just the softest cover by the way. It's I almost want to just hold it when I need comfort. but was the last year of getting this published just a simple, straightforward, no hiccups
Oh
process?
man. Yeah, it was a real walk in the park, let me tell you. Just a regular picnic. Um, so I had tried for several years, pitching this to traditional publishers and trying to find someone who was interested. Um, I knew the concept was valid. I knew the project had legs. I had tested it out in manuscript form with friends and family over the course of several years. And I'd seen people have really kind of profound experiences with this, where they really got some, a real moment of self insight, and sometimes it was even cathartic, and so I knew that I knew I needed to get the book out there one way or the other. And after several years of trying and receiving rejection after rejection, I decided that I was going to skip the gatekeepers, and I was going to self-publish. So that was a whole project of hiring an editor, hiring a book designer, going through the process that normally a publisher would take you through, and so many of the steps that an author doesn't have to think about when they're being published by someone else. Those fell to me, and I didn't know how to do them. So it was a lot of learning by doing, and doing my imperfect best to bring this project to fruition. And it was pretty bumpy with many twists and turns, but I think the end product is a success. I think it's more than good enough, and that was really the standard that I was reaching for, was good enough. So
as an author, when you're working with an editor, you read draft after draft, and I know from my experience as an author, it's easy to want to keep going with that process too, because the next draft can always be a little more perfect than the last. What did you learn through this project about that moment where you finally decide, hey, this is the draft that's going to be published?
Yeah, that as a poet, and I think poets are kind of famous for this. I really love to revise, and I'm always playing with my work, and always looking for new opportunities in the language to make a new kind of sound, or to tweak the rhythm so a line really dances, or to adjust an image, or to really tighten a metaphor. So that's certainly one of the reasons why the book took so long. It's comprised of 181 poems, and to go through that process with each of those poems, it took years. And not that I was working on it constantly over that span of time. It was certainly a very on again, off again sort of project. But I eventually you realize that the revision process can go on forever. And eventually you just have to draw a line and say, okay, this is it. This is it. This is what's going out to the world. And then send it out there and let go and trust that it's going to live its own life, through the unconscious minds of the readers. And that was a scary moment for me. I think it's a scary moment for any author to hand in the final draft and say, this is it. Definitely, it was definitely a moment of both, relief and it was sobering, in a way. But I think these are the drafts of the poems that were ready to go out into the world. So here they are.
I think of all the ways we humans have the opportunity to eventually release the things we've created or had a part in creating into the world. Like even parents get to raise a child from infancy, but eventually it's time to release that child into, metaphorically release that child into the world. What else can you say about that process of deciding when it's time to release a creative efforts, be it painting, be it like a thesis, be it like a new invention someone wants to get out into to market?
Fortunately, I think there are external pressures that help with that whole process. And certainly in the case of the book, I had a book designer whose patience might have been wearing a little bit thin as I made the final tweaks and adjustments to the text. And certainly I had plans for marketing this book. I am marketing it to the tourists who visit the park, and there were time-sensitive issues around bringing that plan into reality. So, part of it was not only just this sense of, oh, now it's finished. I don't know if I ever really truly had that, but it was more that conditions were such that it's now time. It's now time. So that might have been a blessing for me, that it eventually just, I ran the clock out, and we just had to release it. So
As you look back on this accomplishment of releasing this book and now having it available to people around the world to benefit from and learn from and grow with. What are your final reflections? Like we're already at an hour. We could talk for 2 or 3, but we are wrapping up here now. What are your final reflections?
My final reflections, I hope that the readers of the book can truly discover something about themselves that they didn't know before. I hope that the book can point them both inward to the self, to self-knowledge, self-understanding, to develop compassion for the self, but also it can point them outward into the world, because those were sort of my two guiding lights in the composition of the poems. One was that I wanted the poems to help someone attain self-knowledge, and the second was to help people conduct themselves virtuously in the world. So those are really my aspirations for the book. If the book can help someone become more self-aware, and perhaps in a moment at the crossroads to choose to act virtuously in the world, then the book will have fulfilled its purpose.
Thank you, Jason, for your courage and persistence and determination in getting this beautiful book out there. And thanks for being the person you are. I know that over the years I've learned so much from you, and keep being inspired again and again by you. Thank you so much. Thank you for our friendship. Thank you. And please, on a Monday note, I'm going to end the show, but please stay on.
Sure.
And thank you to everyone. Thanks for listening and considering and really taking about every opportunity you get to explore your own life and to grow and to move in the direction you want to go. As I say so often on the show and in my life, you are the best. You are the one and only one of you who can do exactly what you can do in the world. So just keep discovering that and tune in next week and comment if you want. And thanks for being part of this. You are the best. And smile.